That crisp bill in your wallet isn't just a ticket to a cup of coffee. It's a legal minefield you're navigating every single day. Most of us think money is just math, but across the globe, it's actually a bizarre performance governed by laws that seem written by madmen. From jail time for laundry mishaps to the death penalty for shaving a coin, we are counting down 50 of the most absurd currency rules ever conceived. Forget the budget. Your finances are about to get much more dangerous. 1. In Rome, the Trevie fountain is a literal gold mine, collecting over $1 million in tossed coins every single year. However, if you're thinking of going for a midnight dip to help pay for your vacation, you should know that stealing these coins is a serious crime. For years, a man nicknamed D'Artagnan famously cleaned out the fountain daily until the city passed specific laws making the coins the property of the municipality. Now, the money is legally earmarked for charity, and anyone caught with a magnet or a net faces heavy fines. Do you think the city should own your wishes, or should that money stay in the water for whoever is brave enough to grab it? 2. In the United Kingdom, your artistic expression ends where the king's face begins. The currency and banknotes. Act of 1928 makes it a criminal offense to print, write, or draw anything on a British banknote. While we've all seen a dollar bill with a crude mustache or a phone number scribbled in the corner, doing that to a British pound is technically an act of defacement. The Bank of England takes its branding very seriously, and while they probably won't send SWAT teams for a small doodle, the bill instantly loses its status. It's a strange world where a single ink stroke can turn a 20-pound note into a worthless scrap of paper. 3. If you're walking through the humid streets of Bangkok and see a bill fluttering away in the breeze, your survival instinct might tell you to pin it down with your foot. Whatever you do, resist that urge. In Thailand, stepping on currency is a serious crime that can lead to actual prison time. Because the king's image is on every note and coin, and the monarchy is protected by strict laws, using your feet to touch the royal face is considered a monumental insult. Is it reasonable for a government to police your physical movements around money, or is this the ultimate respect for national identity? 4. In the United States, every single piece of currency must legally bear the phrase, "In God we trust." This wasn't just a suggestion from a religious group. It was a 1955 law signed by President Eisenhower during the height of the Cold War. The government wanted to clearly distinguish American capitalism from godless ideologies abroad. If a bill were printed without this phrase today, it would technically be an illegal misprint. It is a fascinating example of how a government can use the law to turn every single transaction in the country into a subtle piece of state-mandated political and religious messaging. 5. Entering India is easy, but leaving with their money is a legal minefield. The Indian government has strict controls on the rupee, classifying it as a closed currency. This means it is technically illegal for foreign nationals to take any Indian currency out of the country when they fly home. Most tourists think this is just a suggestion, but customs officials have the power to seize your cash at the airport. They want the money to stay within their borders to maintain economic stability. It's a weird feeling knowing that the souvenir in your pocket could technically make you an international currency smuggler. 6. Iceland is rapidly becoming the world's first true cashless society, and their laws reflect a future where physical money is almost a nuisance. Unlike many nations that legally mandate businesses to accept all legal tender, Iceland allows shops and even small stalls to refuse cash entirely as long as they offer a digital payment option. We are reaching a point where a crisp banknote is less useful than a piece of plastic. Does the idea of a completely digital economy make you feel secure? Or does the thought of a government being able to switch off your ability to buy food terrify you? 7. Zimbabwe once turned everyone into a trillionaire, but not in the way you'd hope. During their period of hyperinflation, the government kept printing notes with more zeros until they released the infamous $100 trillion bill. The law eventually had to intervene because the currency was physically failing. People were literally carrying bags of cash just to buy a single loaf of bread. They ended up banning their own currency for years, allowing people to use US dollars instead. It's the ultimate proof that money isn't real. It's just a shared agreement that can collapse at any moment. 8. In the Philippines, your pocket change is practically a holy relic. Under Presidential Decree 247, willfully defacing, tearing, or even burning a peso note or coin can land you in prison for 5 years. While Americans might treat a wrinkled $5 bill like trash, doing that here is a federal crime. No origami hearts, no scratching coins, and definitely no using bills as napkins. They see currency as a symbol of national dignity that must stay pristine. Is it right to face a jail cell for accidentally washing a bill in your jeans, or is this law just a bit too sensitive? 9. China is currently conducting a massive legal experiment with the digital yuan that could change everything we know about ownership. Unlike Bitcoin, this is not a private asset. It is a programmable currency controlled entirely by the central bank. The government can technically put an expiration date on your money, forcing you to spend it by a certain time to stimulate the economy during a slump. If you do not spend it, the money simply vanishes from your digital wallet. It turns your life savings into a high-stakes game of hot potato, where the state decides exactly when your personal wealth turns back into digital dust. 10. The U.S. Secret Service has a very specific set of rules for anyone making prop money for movies or magic tricks. To stay legal, your fake cash must be either less than 75% or more than 150% of the size of a real bill. Furthermore, you can only print on one side of the paper. If you ignore these dimensions, you aren't just making a movie prop, you're technically a counterfeiter. At what point does a piece of paper stop being a toy and start being a threat to the entire global economy? Should the government really care if your play money looks a little too realistic? 11. Switzerland is home to one of the most valuable banknotes in the world, the 1,000 franc note. While most countries are trying to kill off high-value bills to stop money laundering, the Swiss have doubled down, legally protecting its status. It is worth over $1,100 and you can actually use it to buy groceries or a coffee. Most retailers in other countries would have a heart attack if you handed them a $1,000 bill, but in Switzerland, it's just Tuesday. They believe high-value cash is a vital part of privacy and freedom, refusing to let the digital age erase their biggest bills. 12. In Italy, walking out of a shop without a receipt isn't just a bad habit, it's a potential legal nightmare. The Guardia di Finanza, or tax police, can literally stop you on the street and demand to see your proof of purchase. If you can't produce that tiny slip of thermal paper for your espresso, both you and the shop owner can be slapped with a heavy fine. This law exists to combat the massive underground economy and ensure every cent is taxed. Do you think the government should have the power to harass you over a $2 coffee receipt? Or is this the only way to catch tax cheats? 13. Here is a quirk of British law that confuses everyone, including the British. Scottish banknotes are technically not legal tender anywhere in the United Kingdom, not even in Scotland itself. They are classified as legal currency, which is a fancy way of saying businesses can accept them if they want to, but they aren't legally forced to. This leads to endless arguments at London pubs, where bartenders refuse to take Scottish bills because they look like monopoly money to them. It's a bizarre legal loophole that leaves millions of people carrying cash that is perfectly real but technically rejectable by law. 14. The Internal Revenue Service in the United States has a law that sounds like it was written by a comedian. You are legally required to report and pay taxes on income from illegal activities. Whether you're a high-stakes bank robber or a localer, the IRS expects their cut of your loot on Form 1040, Line 8Z. If you return stolen property in the same year, you don't have to report it. But if you keep it, the government wants its tax. It's the ultimate gotcha, because even if the police can't prove you committed the crime, the IRS can still put you in prison for tax evasion. 15. Have you ever wondered why you never see a living president on a dollar bill? It isn't just a tradition, it is actually federal law. Following the Revolutionary War, the Founding Fathers wanted to distance themselves from British royalty, who slapped their own faces on coins the moment they took the throne. In 1866, Congress passed a law stating that no living person could be featured on any U.S. currency. This ensures that our money honors historical figures rather than stroking the ego of whoever happens to be in the White House this week. It is a rare law that actually prevents politicians from being even more narcissistic than they already are. 16. Australia has a very scientific law regarding damaged currency. If you have a banknote that's been torn in half, it's not necessarily worthless. According to the Reserve Bank of Australia, if you have between 20 and 80% of a bill, you are legally entitled to a payment based on the specific percentage of the note that remains. If you have exactly half the bill, you get half the value. This turns every accidental laundry mishap or dog chewing incident into a geometry project. It's one of the few places where half a dollar can literally be half of a physical dollar bill. 17. In Cambodia and parts of Vietnam, the law of the street often overrides the official bank laws when it comes to US dollars. While a $5 bill with a tiny, microscopic tear is still perfectly legal in America, in Southeast Asia, that bill is effectively dead. Many local laws and bank regulations allow businesses to refuse any foreign currency that isn't in pristine, museum-quality condition. A single ink mark or a fold can make a $100 bill worthless at a currency exchange. Why should a tiny physical flaw negate the entire value of a global reserve currency? And who actually benefits from this perfectionism? 18. If you're a fan of the supernatural, Vietnam has some specific rules for you. It's a common tradition to burn votive paper money so that deceased ancestors can have cash in the afterlife. However, the government passed laws to regulate this, banning the printing of votive money that looks too much like real Vietnamese dong. They don't want people confusing ghost money with the real thing, which could lead to accidental fraud or devaluing the actual currency. It's a rare instance where the law tries to regulate the economy of the spirit world to protect the one we live in. 19. Under the U.S. Bank Secrecy Act, banks are legally required to report any cash transaction over $10,000 to the federal government. But the real trap is structuring. If you know the $10,000 rule and decide to deposit $9,000 twice to avoid the paperwork, you've committed a felony. Even if the money was earned totally legally, the act of intentionally avoiding the report is a crime that can lead to the government seizing every penny you have. It's a law that basically says trying to keep your legal business private is, in itself, an illegal act. 20. In medieval England, money was so scarce that the law allowed for some very slippery tax payments. For centuries, you could legally pay your rent or taxes to the crown in eels. Thousands of eels were delivered to landlords and government officials every year as a legitimate form of currency. Some records show that even the building of cathedrals was partially financed through the trade of these slimy creatures. It sounds disgusting now, but back then, an eel was a stable, edible asset. Does this prove that anything can be money if enough people agree on it? Or have we just lost our minds since the Middle Ages? 21. Deep in the Pacific, on the island of Yap, they use giant limestone discs called rye stones as currency. Some of these stones are so massive that they cannot be moved, so the law simply recognizes a change in ownership through oral history and collective agreement. Even if a stone accidentally sinks to the bottom of the ocean during transport, it still holds its full value because everyone agrees it is still there. It is the ultimate proof that money is just a shared myth. If a giant rock at the bottom of the sea can be worth a fortune just because people say so, why do we care so much about digital numbers on a bank screen? 22. Emperor Vespasian once famously declared that money does not smell after he imposed a bizarre tax on the collection of urine from public toilets in ancient Rome. In those days, urine was a valuable source of ammonia used for tanning leather and cleaning clothes. When his son criticized the tax as disgusting and beneath the dignity of the throne, Vespasian held up a gold coin to prove that the profit was clean regardless of the source. This law birthed the concept that the origin of money does not matter as long as it spends. Would you be willing to pay a luxury tax on your own bathroom habits if it meant lower income taxes elsewhere? 23. You might think you can print your own community currency to help local businesses, but the FBI might strongly disagree. In 2011, Bernard von Nothaus was convicted of monetary terrorism for creating the Liberty Dollar, a private silver-backed currency. The government argued that his coins looked too much like official U.S. tender and were a direct attempt to compete with the Federal Reserve and confuse the public. He faced up to 20 years in prison for the high crime of trying to provide a stable alternative to the dollar. Apparently, the government hates competition more than a monopolistic cable company hates a new fiber optic startup. 24. In Israel, if you want to buy a used car or a fancy watch with a briefcase full of cash, you are looking at a potential criminal record. To fight money laundering and the black economy, the law strictly limits cash transactions between individuals to relatively small amounts, currently around $4,000. Anything above that limit must be paid via digital transfer or a bank check so the government can watch the trail. It is a law that assumes anyone with a large amount of physical cash is automatically a supervillain. Is this a necessary step to stop crime or a terrifying overreach that eliminates our right to financial privacy? 25. In South Africa, the law makes it a criminal offense to mutilate, cut, tear, or perforate any banknote. But they take it a step further. It is also illegal to use images of their money in any advertisement without explicit written permission from the Reserve Bank. This includes even tiny distorted images in the background of a flyer. They want total control over how their currency is perceived visually. It is a legal way of saying that even though you have the bill in your hand, you don't actually own the design. The government owns the brand, and you are just a temporary user of their intellectual property. 26. Canada has a very specific way of telling you to stop being a nuisance at the checkout counter. According to the Canadian Currency Act, there is a legal limit on how many coins you can use in a single transaction before a merchant can officially tell you to go away. You can't dump more than 25 loonies or 40 quarters on a counter and expect to walk away with a flat-screen TV. This law was essentially designed to prevent people from using petty revenge as a payment method. If you try to pay a $100 fine in nickels, you aren't just being annoying, you're actually breaking federal law. 27. South Korea has a zero-tolerance policy for anyone trying to get creative with their change. While DIY enthusiasts in other countries might hammer a coin into a ring or a pendant, doing so in South Korea can land you in a jail cell. The Bank of Korea Act explicitly forbids the destruction or melting of coins for any reason. They view the currency as public property on loan to you, not something you actually own. It's a harsh reality for artists who see a coin as a canvas, rather than a unit of trade, turning a simple hobby into a potential felony and a very expensive legal lesson. 28. In certain periods of the Roman Empire, the law was used to punish political rivals through the currency itself. If a new ruler wanted to erase a predecessor from history, they would enact damnatio memoriae, which included legally mandating the melting down of every single coin featuring that person's face. It was a financial reset designed to wipe a human being out of existence and out of the pockets of the citizens. It shows that money has always been the ultimate tool of propaganda. If the government can legally delete someone's face from every coin in your pocket, do they effectively control your history too? 29. In ancient Egypt, the taxman did not want your gold. He wanted your beer and your grain because that was what actually mattered. Since they did not have a standardized coinage system for centuries, the law mandated that taxes be paid in kind. This meant that government warehouses were essentially massive granaries and beer cellars. People were paid in rations, and your wealth was measured by how much bread you could store without it molding. It was a functional economy where you could literally eat your paycheck, which honestly sounds more reliable than the current fluctuations of the stock market or the crypto world. 30. Up until the Coinage Act of 1857, foreign coins like the Spanish silver dollar were actually legal tender in the United States. For decades, the law allowed people to pay their taxes and debts using money from other countries because the U.S. Mint simply could not keep up with the massive demand for coins in a growing nation. When the law finally changed, it caused a widespread panic as people scrambled to get rid of their suddenly illegal foreign silver. Imagine waking up tomorrow and finding out that the government decided your foreign currency is suddenly as useless as pocket lint. Do you think we should go back to a global gold standard? 31. Sweden is so far ahead in the race to become a cashless society that they actually had to pass laws to slow the process down. Some elderly citizens and rural communities were being left behind because shops and banks were flat out refusing to take physical krona. The government had to intervene with legislation requiring major banks to provide a minimum level of cash services to the public. It is a strange legal battle where the state is forcing businesses to accept the very money the state itself printed. Are we moving too fast toward a digital future? Or is physical cash just a dirty relic of the past that needs to disappear forever? 32. In Venezuela, hyperinflation became so extreme that the law eventually made it mandatory for people to use a state-sponsored cryptocurrency called the petro. It was supposedly backed by the nation's massive oil reserves, but in reality, it was a legal mess that few people actually trusted or used. The government even tried to peg salaries and pensions to this digital token, effectively forcing an entire population into a crypto experiment they didn't ask for. It is a terrifying example of how a government can use the law to force citizens onto a sinking financial ship just to maintain a shred of control over a dying economy. 33. Ancient Sparta had a very effective, if slightly insane, way of stopping people from becoming obsessed with wealth. Instead of gold or silver, their law mandated the use of heavy iron bars as currency. These bars were intentionally cooled in vinegar to make the iron brittle and worthless for any other use. They were so heavy and cumbersome that moving a small amount of money required a literal ox cart. The idea was that no one would bother stealing or hoarding money if it was physically impossible to hide it. Imagine trying to pay for a modern mortgage with 5 tons of scrap metal. 34. In Nigeria, spraying money, the act of throwing notes into the air at weddings or parties, is a massive cultural tradition. However, it is also technically illegal under the Central Bank of Nigeria Act. The law states that spraying, dancing, or matching on the naira is an abuse of the currency that can lead to 6 months in prison or a heavy fine. The government claims they are protecting the dignity of the currency, but for most people, it just feels like the state is trying to crash the world's most expensive party. Should the government have the right to police how you celebrate with the money you earned? 35. Most people think the $100 bill is the highest denomination in America, but the US once printed a massive $100,000 gold certificate. However, unless you are a high-ranking official at the Federal Reserve, it is highly illegal for you to own one. These notes were created in 1934 strictly for transactions between Federal Reserve banks and were never intended for public circulation. If you happen to find one in your grandfather's attic, do not try to spend it at Starbucks. You won't get a latte, you'll get a very long and uncomfortable visit from some very serious federal agents. 36. In the United Kingdom, certain laws regarding currency still carry the weight of ancient treason. While the death penalty is gone, defacing the monarch's image on a coin is still technically a very serious offense under the Coinage Act of 1971. The law states that no one can melt down or break up a metal coin without a special license from the Treasury. It is not just about the money. It is about the legal protection of the crown's image. They treat a 10-pence piece with more legal reverence than some countries treat their own citizens, proving that in Britain, the king's face is a sacred legal entity. 37. In Japan, the 1 yen coin is so light it can actually float on water, but the law surrounding its production is a heavy burden on the government. Because it's made of pure aluminum, the cost to manufacture a single 1 yen coin is often double or even triple its actual face value. Despite this massive loss, Japanese law mandates the continued production of these coins to ensure the pricing system remains intact and precise. It's a bizarre legal requirement that forces the mint to literally lose money on every single coin they make, just to keep the economy's smallest unit of measurement alive. Does it make sense to spend 2 cents just to create 1 cent of value? 38. If you are an artist who likes to incorporate money into your work, you better be careful with the Counterfeit Deterrence Act in the United States. The law allows the government to seize any artwork that uses images of currency if it doesn't meet very strict requirements, such as being printed on only one side and being significantly larger or smaller than a real bill. This means even a painting of a dollar bill can technically be classified as a counterfeit instrument. It is a weird legal gray area where the government's fear of fake money trumps the First Amendment, proving they are willing to prosecute a painter for being too realistic. 39. Brazil once had inflation so devastating that prices changed multiple times every single day, making it impossible to even plan a grocery trip. To fix this without causing a total collapse, they created a ghost currency called the URV, or Unit of Real Value. For months, prices were listed in URVs, which stayed stable, but you still paid in the old, dying currency at the daily exchange rate provided by the central bank. Eventually, they just turned the URV into the actual currency, the real. It was a massive psychological trick played on an entire nation to convince people that their money actually had value again after years of chaos. 40. When France switched to the euro, the law gave citizens a very strict deadline to exchange their old francs at the bank. Once that window slammed shut in 2012, billions of francs essentially became colorful, useless wallpaper overnight. Unlike the US, where a bill from 1860 is still technically legal tender, if you can find a cashier who recognizes it, many European nations have laws that allow them to kill old currencies entirely. It is a brutal reminder that the value of the paper in your wallet depends entirely on the government's willingness to keep honoring the promise printed on it. One day it's wealth, the next it's trash. 41. Australia was the first country to introduce polymer banknotes, which are essentially high-tech plastic. They are famous for being indestructible, but the law still protects them with a strange level of intensity. It is a federal crime to intentionally destroy or even heat these notes to see if they melt. There was once a viral trend of people trying to shrink their money in the microwave, which resulted in the Reserve Bank issuing a stern legal reminder that doing so could land you in court. It turns out that even though the money is built like a tank, the government still wants you to treat it like a delicate piece of art. 42. In Bhutan, the ngultram is the official currency, but it has a legal shadow that is inseparable from the Indian rupee. Because their economy is so tightly linked to India, the law states that the two currencies must always be at a 1-to-1 parity. However, there are bizarre restrictions on taking large denominations of Indian bills into Bhutan to prevent money laundering and tax evasion. It's a legal tightrope where one country's money is perfectly fine to use, but only if you use the right-sized bills. It's a confusing system where the law essentially dictates the physical thickness of your wallet before you even cross the border. 43. Back in 2006, the United States Mint realized they had a serious problem. The metal inside pennies and nickels was suddenly worth more than the coins themselves. To stop savvy entrepreneurs from melting down millions of cents to sell as raw copper and zinc, the government made the practice a federal crime. If you're caught turning 5 cents into 6 cents through a furnace, you face 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. It creates a hilarious paradox where the government forces you to keep value in a form that is technically worth less than the material it's printed on. 44. Switzerland is famous for its banking secrecy, but most people don't realize that this secrecy is a matter of criminal law, not just bank policy. Under the Swiss Banking Act of 1934, it is a crime for any bank employee to reveal the identity of an account holder to anyone, including the government. If a banker leaks your information, they don't just get fired, they go to prison. While international pressure has weakened these laws recently, the core principle remains. In Switzerland, keeping a secret about money is a legal duty as serious as a doctor's oath, turning silence into a national industry. 45. If you visit North Korea as a tourist, the local currency, the North Korean won, is legally forbidden to you. Foreigners are strictly required to use euros, dollars, or Chinese yuan at special state-run stores. The law is designed to keep the local population and their currency completely isolated from the outside world. If you are caught with local yuan in your pocket as you leave the country, it can be seized, and you could face a very uncomfortable interrogation. It is a rare and haunting legal situation where a nation's own money is considered a protected item that foreigners aren't allowed to touch. 46. King Henry VIII of England earned the nickname Old Copper-Nose because of a legal scam he ran on his own people. As he ran out of money for his wars and lavish lifestyle, he passed laws to debase the currency, replacing the silver in coins with cheap copper. As the silver wore off with use, the king's nose on the coin's face would turn red from the copper underneath. He essentially legalized the theft of his subjects' wealth by diluting the value of every coin in their pockets. It's a classic historical reminder that the biggest threat to your money's value is often the person who prints it. 47. In Brazil, the law actually protects you from disgusting money. Banks are legally required to replace any banknotes that are excessively dirty, torn, or otherwise unfit for circulation at no cost to the citizen. This leads to a massive logistics operation where the central bank is constantly burning mountains of old, grimy bills and replacing them with fresh ones. They view the physical cleanliness of their currency as a matter of public health and national pride. Would you feel more confident in your economy if the government legally guaranteed that every bill in your wallet would always be crisp and clean? 48. The United States Treasury has a special department called the Mutilated Currency Division, and their job is governed by a very generous law. If your money is burned, waterlogged, or literally eaten by a cow, the government will legally replace it at full value, provided that at least 51% of the bill is present. They have experts who spend all day using tweezers and microscopes to reconstruct money that looks like a pile of ash. It is one of the few laws that actually works in favor of the clumsy citizen, proving that even if your life is a mess, the government will try to save your cash. 49. The European Central Bank legally killed the 500-euro note, often nicknamed the Bin Laden note, because it was so popular with money launderers. While it is still technically legal tender, they stopped printing it entirely and have passed regulations to slowly phase it out of existence. The law essentially made the note too suspicious to carry. If you show up at a bank with a stack of 500s, you are almost guaranteed an immediate investigation. It's a law that didn't ban a value, but rather a physical shape of money that was simply too convenient for the world's most dangerous criminals. All right, we have covered 49 points, and we are down to the final one. But before we get to number 50, it is time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the most incredible rule from today's list goes to Thailand's law against stepping on money. It is the perfect blend of cultural respect and extreme legal consequences, turning a simple, everyday reflex into a potential prison sentence. Do you agree with our verdict? Or did another point on this list seem even more absurd to you? Let us know in the comments. And now, for our final number. 50. In 1933, the United States government committed what many consider the ultimate financial heist against its own citizens. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, which made it illegal for Americans to own more than a small amount of gold. Citizens were legally forced to sell their gold coins and bullion to the Federal Reserve at a fixed price, or face 10 years in prison. Once the government had collected all the gold, they immediately devalued the dollar, effectively stealing 40% of the wealth from everyone who had complied. This law remained in effect for over 40 years, proving that when the government needs money, they don't just tax you. They can legally redefine what you are even allowed to own. Money is more than just paper and metal. It's a shared hallucination governed by some of the world's strangest rules. From ancient Sparta to the digital future, these laws prove that currency is only as real as a government's willingness to enforce its quirks. It's a complex web of promises and bizarre restrictions that dictates our lives. What's the weirdest thing you've ever found in your pocket change? If you enjoyed this journey through the world's most peculiar wallets, join us by hitting that subscribe button. We'll be back with more stories that make you question everything.